Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Powlis. New York lawmakers have successfully passed a 2015-2016 state budget totaling $142 billion. It's the fifth consecutive on-time budget, and it's your top story this noon. Among the legislation's key points, controlled overall spending growth to below 2%, keeping the state on track to turn a $10 billion deficit into a surplus within 5 years. Funding for economic development here in upstate New York, $1.5 billion set aside for revitalization and job growth. Renewed ethics reform requiring legislators to disclose more about the money they make from outside jobs. And no tax increases, as well as a reinstatement of the original STAR school property tax relief program for homeowners. As for education, well, that's where all the controversy was this year. $1.4 billion increase in school aid, a 60% reduction in the gap elimination adjustment, and approval of stricter teacher evaluations, which states those teachers found ineffective 3 years in a row will be fired. The judgment based partly on test scores as well as observation by a school administrator and an expert. Now, joining me live on the phone from Albany is Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi. First of all, Anthony, a very long day and night for you and your colleagues out there. How are things looking now that you've had a little chance to sleep on everything?
Things are pretty good now that we slept a little bit. Got done last night around 3:30 in the morning to finally pass everything. I think I'm happy the budget passed. I supported most of the budget except for the education part, which I voted against. But I think it's really good for New York State. It's good for our area. There's a lot of good things in the budget that will impact our area. And overall, I'm happy we got it done on time.
All right, before we talk education, because I know that's a big topic and you voted against part of that, I want you to talk about some of the things that came through in this budget. Number one, you've got $1.5 billion for Upstate Revitalization Fund. You've got $3 million going to Griffith's Business and Technology Park for certain things, and you've got $1 million for New Air, the UAS test site. Talk about those bullet points for me, would you? Because those are all good things for this area.
Sure. The money for Griffiths, obviously, with Rome Labs and DFAS and the Eastern Air Defense Sector, we want to make sure that we're doing what we can as a state to protect those military installations, and they provide great jobs for our area, so there's some funding in there to help do that. There's money in there for New Air, which is the unmanned aerial research program in Rome, which is going to be taking off and starting to attract some companies from outside of the state to come here to do the testing. Probably the biggest ticket item in the budget for our area is $300 million for a new hospital in Utica, which is a really big capital project that we were able to successfully get into the budget. So that's going to be big, and we're going to hear a lot more about that going forward, but a lot in there for the Mohawk Valley.
Absolutely. Now, I got to touch back on education. I know that you had voted against some of the things that the governor was proposing. What made you vote no, and what was the sticking point that you just said, look, this is not, even though it all went through and local schools are getting more money than they did, what made it just not sit well with you?
You know, I was very happy, and I did support the part of the budget that dealt with the funding that's coming to our schools.
Sure.
Many of the schools got a nice increase in funding this year, but I could not support the education budget because it had all these reforms in there that the governor was proposing, and many of them did get scaled down from their original form. But my concern was that the proposals he had, I felt, were going to increase the reliance on standardized testing, these high-stakes tests that children have to take. And I was really concerned about the fact that this new teacher evaluation system would have to be adopted by school districts by November 15th, and if they didn't adopt them by then, they were at risk of losing funding. I could not accept that. I think many of our school districts and superintendents felt the same way, and ultimately I voted no for it. So
let me clarify, has that been tied in, that the schools have to adopt that in order to get these funds?
Absolutely. That's even though I voted no, it did pass both the Senate and the Assembly, and expected to be signed by the governor. The deal is that the school districts, the Board of Regents and the State Education Department have until June 30th to adopt a new teacher evaluation system, and then the school districts have to negotiate with their local collective bargaining units on that by November 15th. And if they are not able to come up with an agreement, then they are at risk of losing funding for the schools.
I got to stay with this for a minute, Assemblyman. Now, how rushed did you and some of your colleagues feel with this? Because at one point we were hearing that that was off the table, and now all of a sudden, somewhere through the day yesterday, that all came back to the table. Is that what ultimately led you to say, whoa, 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 this isn't exactly what we were talking about? And did you guys feel rushed into trying to get this done? Could you have used a couple of more days, maybe a few more negotiations to maybe change those things?
I definitely think that we could have used a couple more days. If you look at the budget itself for education, we got the legislation sometime around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday. There wasn't enough time for organizations like the School Boards Association or the Council of School Superintendents or even our own local superintendents to read through everything, to really examine what it means for them and their districts. And that was a factor that played in my mind as to why I couldn't support it. And ultimately, what we're finding is, I think it's going to cause a lot of chaos and certainly putting more emphasis on these tests that children have to take, and really going after teachers. I think the teachers are really under attack right now in the state, and it's unfortunate because they are not the reason that some schools are struggling. The reason some schools are struggling are because they have higher rates of poverty and lack of adequate funding.
All right, Assemblyman Brindisi, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us this noon. Get a little more rest and then right back to work, correct?
Thank you, Jason.
All right, thank you.